Hear that? That's the sound of a patient whose health data is protected from a cyber attack. And that's the sound of a financial system that's digitally secured from bad actors. Right now, there's an invisible war being fought on a digital battlefield that impacts what we do every day. That's why at Peraton, we do the can't be done to help protect the vital systems we rely on. Because if we don't, the alternative is unimaginable. Peraton.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the direct-to-video connoisseur. This is Matt here. I know we've had a little bit of time off after a little bit of a hiatus, but we are back, and we have an exciting episode here today. And really special guest here. We've got Simon from Explosive Action on the show. So welcome, Simon. Welcome back.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and so our big thing today is we are talking about Gary Daniels, who the movie we're going to be discussing, Skin Traffik. When we review it, it'll be his 50th film on the site, so he's going to join Dolph in the 50 club here on this site, which means that if you put their two together, the two of them together, they'll account for almost 10% of the movies we've reviewed at the direct-to-video connoisseur.
That's very impressive.
Yeah, so it's interesting because most people, when you ask, like if you'd ask them who's got the most reviews, most people would say, oh, Dolph, of course he must have the most. And then when you talk about like who has the second most, people think it's got to be someone like an Eric Roberts or somebody like that who's been in so many movies. They're surprised to find out that it's Gary Daniels, but I think he's just very prolific, in the 90s and the 2000s.
Well, he's got, IMDb says about 75 credits. He's as you say, prolific.
Yeah, he definitely got his work in for sure, and I think he was somebody that, especially in the '90s, he just wanted to. It seemed like he was just like he would do anything. He would he'd go anywhere in the world, just shoot anywhere as long as he could be in the movie.
Absolutely. Yep.
Now, before we get into the film, I wanted to talk about your YouTube channel, just because if people haven't been, if you're not subscribed, it's Explosive Action, and it's really cool because a lot of times you'll talk about your recent hauls or recent pickups that you've added to your collection, which is a really prodigious collection. It's pretty amazing the stuff that you have both from for movies and metal, your metal collection with like records and tapes and everything. But one of the cool episodes that you did recently was you actually went out and kind of did a haul of for movies. And one of the things I think here in the United States that's interesting, and maybe you've seen the same thing in Australia, is that even before the pandemic hit, the sort of the in-person retail shopping experience was starting to diminish. That it seemed like online, whether it's Amazon or companies just selling their things online, that the whole idea of just going out and going to stores and kind of picking through the shelves, it seems like it was diminishing a bit here in the States. Has that been the same for you in Australia?
Yeah, it has. Probably not to the same degree, but there's definitely shops that used to stock DVDs and Blu-rays that have either downsized or just eliminated them. So we have Target here, just like you do in the States. They've dropped it entirely. Our big media shop is called JB Hi-Fi. They're sort of a Best Buy equivalent. They do electronics and they do music and movies. That depends on which shop you go to these days. Some of the key city ones, they're still selling movies, but smaller shops are just dropping them entirely or cutting back, and that's kind of sad. That's for the new release stuff. In terms of like digging around and trying to find used items, that's also becoming kind of hard. We have a a chain of pawnbrokers here called Cash Converters. A lot of those have stopped selling DVDs. It's getting kind of difficult, and I guess that's why I go for these hunting hauls and try and dig around a bit, try and find some gold, because it is getting more challenging to find anything interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned about Best Buy. I remember it was probably like 6 or 7 years ago. So a good amount of time ago, somebody on Twitter posted they went to a flea market, kind of sort of hunting around to try to. I don't know what if you have the same term in Australia for that. I guess it's like a market where people have their little. It's like kind of like a sort of generally an open air market, but may not always. But people have sort of their stands where they're selling whatever they're selling.
Yes, we definitely have those.
Yeah, and so somebody at this flea market was selling DVDs from Best Buy. They had the Best Buy stickers on them. In some cases, they were even like, Best Buy packages, like they had, sort of packaged the movies together. And this person saw tons of movies in there, and he was guessing at that point that Best Buy was downsizing their DVD selection, which it turned out that's what they've done. I think they're pretty much the same as like Target here, where it's like just the very absolute newest releases have Blu-ray or DVD releases, and then it's harder to get sort of the older ones, or you don't really have those racks of DVDs anymore that you used to have at newer places. You still go to we call them thrift shops here, or charity shops, where you can go through used DVDs and try to find something, but even those are difficult now, because it's a lot of just sort of big release things that people just got rid of because they were downsizing. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, that is something I keep running into as well. I've got a running joke with a few of my friends that every time we go to a charity shop, you've got to sift through mountains and mountains of copies of The Wedding Singer, right, or just any romantic comedies, because they just seem to just breed in these charity shops. You leave 2 of them and then they turn into 10. What I did notice recently, though, is I think you've got these as well. Yours are called Red Box, from what I understand, the DVD rental little boxes. We used to have, video rental shops just like you did, Blockbuster and that kind of thing. One of our nation's chains was called Video Easy. All of their shops have shut down, but they replaced them with the boxes. And, they did well, I think, for a little while. But then I went to the charity store just last month and saw mountains and mountains of DVDs from those bins, from those boxes. And you could tell, I mean, they all had the same logos, and there was just repeated copies of the same Blockbuster copies that I guess somebody emptied out one of these rental bins and then just took them to the charity store.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I wonder if it's sort of the same thing that, like, the Red Box here in the U.S., like, they still exist, right? So you go to, like, a, grocery store or, pharmacy, and there'll be one outside,
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, and I remember I signed up for my Red Box account because there was a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie that I could only get. I can't remember which one it was. It was new at the time, that I could only get, and so I have the account still. So they email me because they've created their own streaming service to compete with like Netflix and those places.
Yep.
And I think that's where a lot of those companies are going, is that even for a company like a Redbox or Video Easy, where it's like there's really no overhead, right? You just put the box, or you put the machine out in front of the business, and let the rentals happen. Even for them, they seem to be moving more towards streaming. So yeah, that idea of physical media is just it's just, yeah, it seems like it's shrinking even more.
Yeah, it is, and I think general people's perception of physical media, like whenever I talk about my collection with people at work, their response is always, "Don't you have Netflix?" Like, yes, we do, but I also don't care. I like to have things. I like to have a collection. They're like, why? Why do you want these things? Some people just don't understand.
No, and it is an interesting, because I used to have a collection, and a lot of my collections is storage. And I once I moved down here to Philadelphia, where my wife and I live, I don't have as much as I used to have, but I appreciate since I started doing the blog again and the podcast again, I mostly do movies through streaming because it's easier for me to get screen grabs.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. because I used to have this more elaborate setup where I had a USB device that would allow me to plug in, my VCR or the TV, or even like the cable box or something, and I could get images off of anything, and then of course the computer I was using had a DVD drive, which now computers that I use now don't have DVD drives, so now it's like I only get streaming. But one of the big things I miss by only doing streaming and not doing actual physical media is a lot of times when you go to the DVD, there's a commentary track or there's behind the scenes footage, and you get like little bits and pieces of what they were going, what the people making the film were going for at the time, that enhances a better understanding of what the movie's about. And with streaming, you don't get any of that. It's just the movie and that's it. There's no secondary audio or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. You definitely get more value for money if you buy a physical copy, and particularly if you're into, I guess you could say, modern collecting of Blu-rays. The labels that are releasing a lot of the the horror films, they're putting a lot of effort into the features and the presentation. Companies like Arrow and Vinegar Syndrome, these companies, they're treating physical format movies with real love and care, and they're just chock full of extras, and sometimes a soundtrack CD will be in there, and a 64-page booklet and all kinds of things, and I think that's something I enjoy supporting as well.
Yeah. One thing that really amazed me recently was I had gotten like a promo copy of Arrow Video's RoboCop release that they did. Yeah, and it was amazing, because the funny thing is, at that time I was listening to that here in the United States, and I think probably throughout the world, but there's this sort of this tension between millennials and baby boomers that that they were kind of fighting with each other about how the state of the world. And what was fascinating about the RoboCop thing is there were a lot of interviews with people who were making that movie, and they were all baby boomers. They were all born in the 50s, but they had the kind of the same like energy that millennials were bringing to Twitter, as far as like social justice concerns and causes, and it was kind of funny to see that like a lot of the things that kids today think of in terms of like being anti-corporate, being kind of understanding like this sort of corporate structure and being against sort of those corporate ills. It's funny how a movie like RoboCop was probably kind of planting a lot of those seeds, and they didn't even really know it. And you don't get that by just watching RoboCop. I mean, you can kind of get some of it from watching RoboCop because you can see some of the themes in there. But when you're actually hearing them talk about it, the people who made the film talk about it and how excited they were about trying to get these messages out there, it enhances the whole experience. You're not just watching the movie, but you're finding out like how the people who made it, what they wanted to do with it. And yeah, I agree with you, especially like Arrow. One thing I've noticed Arrow does is they will put some of their collection to stream on services like Amazon Prime, and I think that kind of just gives you a taste of like what you could get from them. And I know for me, it brings me to their website, and I start looking up different things that I want to buy because I'm like, oh, I saw one of the movies in that collection on Amazon Prime, and I get the whole collection or something. So yeah, I think that's one thing that's kind of cool, is that I think maybe that's what we're going to see for physical media, is these sort of more like boutique enterprises that's exactly produce, it. Yeah, just for the collectors, people that want all of that stuff to go with it.
That's what I think is going to happen. I mean, if I go to any shop now, I can quite easily get the latest Marvel action film on DVD, Blu-ray, or 4K, and I can't imagine that going away for 5 years. But I think for most other, maybe not top 10 movies that come out in that year, we're going to see less and less physical releases. But hopefully at the same time, we'll see more sort of niche boutique labels releasing, picking up some of the slack that the bigger companies like Universal will, they're going to stop doing it eventually. Disney, for example, they're putting all their money into Disney Plus now, and they've already said they're going to focus a lot less on 4K releases. I presume that'll filter through to the rest of their market as well at some point.
Yeah, yeah. I have to assume, especially with Disney, where Disney's mindset, and of course now with the pandemic here, especially in the United States, with the way the theater industry has been really hit by that. But I think even before that, the theater industry was getting hit hard. And Disney's mindset, it seemed like, was, we've got these properties like Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar, whatever, and then of course their own cartoons that they've been making live action features for, and their mindset, it seemed like, was, let's take over the theater. Let's see if we can get 60% of the screens, with our movies, and sort of freeze out. So like if, I don't know, like, Warner releases a DC movie, it doesn't get as many screens. The Batman movie kind of gets frozen out that way. And one of the things that they were doing as a result of that is they were really starting to squeeze out independent theaters, because they were vaulting a lot of especially the Fox movies that they purchased, like, something like a Say Anything. So a local indie theater that wanted to show Say Anything wouldn't be able to have the rights to it, for like a special night screening or something. And it does seem like, I think they're kind of wanting to do the same thing with their with the other movies, is that they've got Disney Plus, so they can funnel everything to Disney Plus. Kind of the way they used to do, like, they were only going to sell Pinocchio on VHS for a short period of time, and then they'd pull it, or 101 Dalmatians. It sounds like they're trying to do the same thing with all of their properties, and I wonder if eventually it's going to be a situation where, like, you can only buy Black Panther on Blu-ray, new. For a short period, and they're going to pull it and put it strictly on Disney Plus most of the time, and then every once in a while they'll put it out for collectors to buy, like they used to do with their VHSs.
Yeah, and that's probably what will happen, and I imagine very limited runs as well. There's just not going to be the demand for mum and pop and the kids to go and get these movies and put a disc in. They're just going to keep enforcing and suggesting that people stick with the streaming service, because there's a lock in. They pay the same $9.95 or whatever it is a month, and they're just going to keep doing it. But once they buy one DVD for $15, then there's no more money. So it's to the streaming company's best interest to not release a physical copy, as annoying as that is. But then for people like me that watched the Luke Goss film, Michael J. White, The Hard Way, which is on Netflix, there's no copy of that. I can't get a copy of that film. I have to watch it on Netflix, and now I can't put it on the shelf with my other films, and I find that really frustrating.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. Yeah, because I was going to say the same thing. Like, the Irishman, Martin Scorsese film. It's, Martin Scorsese is one of those directors that people like to have all of his movies. Or like you said, The Hard Way, the interesting thing about The Hard Way is that wasn't even a Netflix original. It was released by Netflix. Netflix was the studio, or was the company that was releasing it, kind of like a Lionsgate or something like that. So even just by being released from Netflix. And so, yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, if you don't have a subscription to Netflix, you can't, you can only watch it once. And the other problem too is that you don't get any kind of commentary tracks. Like you said, you can't put it on your shelf with the other movies. And so that's another thing too, is that idea that, yeah, if Netflix is releasing it, that's it. It's, it exists, only through Netflix. And I guess they did release their Stranger Things series on DVD. So they do eventually
do that. They do it eventually for some things, but not everything. Like a Stranger Things series and the Daredevil series is about the first two things I can think of. But the Indonesian film The Night Comes for Us, there's no release of that.
Right.
That's a real shame, because I want to set it next to the Raid 1 and Raid 2 films on my shelf.
Yeah, and now we're getting more and more of these Netflix action releases where you've got what was that, Extraction? Was that the one that was?
I think that was it.
Yeah. Yeah, and Six Underground, those kinds of things where it's like there are these big movies that you would expect to have, and normal part, people would get the Blu-ray for that and want all the extras and all that. One thing I've noticed is with our cable company is that you can buy movies for the cable box.
Right.
And I guess you have them as long as you're subscribing to that cable service, as long as you don't, as we say, cut the cord. And those come with the extras that you normally would get with a DVD. It's like it sort of entices people to spend the $20 to buy the movie for their cable box device. to get those extras. But again, with Netflix, you don't get any of that. You can't. I don't think you can buy any. I don't think you can buy like the hard way, for example, on your cable box or another device like that. It just exists with Netflix.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's just a streaming copy. It's there for the whims of Netflix. If they decide that they want to take it down or they lose the rights, then well, it's gone. Maybe it goes to a competing streaming company that I don't have access to. And then that's even more annoying. It's just not an ideal situation. And when you mention Six Underground, as soon as that hit Netflix, I remember seeing DVDs of that on eBay. They were obviously bootlegs, but they were selling and people were buying them. So there's obviously still a market. People want these things on a physical format.
Yeah, and like we talked about with these boutique companies like Arrow or Vinegar Syndrome, where they're kind of doing limited runs, and I think with the mindset for those companies is they kind of produce it as they need it. I think, and if we start to get more of that sort of on-demand approach to these, like a company like Netflix, they could probably make a lot of money if they just even had their own personal website up where you could go and order a copy of the hard way. And I can't imagine that it would really cut into their bottom line in terms of people getting their service. I mean, I could see maybe if it's like, with The Irishman, if people could buy it right away, maybe they wouldn't bother getting Netflix for that. I think that might be different. But I think something like The Hard Way is something that it's almost like Netflix could sell the prospect of buying it by being able to stream it first and people liking it and saying like, okay, you know what, I'm going to buy this. It seems like it could work in the opposite direction for some of those movies where people watch it first by having their Netflix account, and again, most people, like you said, they pay for their streaming service every month. They don't really think about it. They just keep paying it whether they watch movies on it or not.
Yep.
Yeah, and so
it's such a small amount of money. Just it's the price of 2 coffees or something a month. So you forget about that you're even paying it.
Yeah, and so then, if you do watch The Hard Way on there, maybe you think like, okay, you know what, this is something I'd like to add to my collection. And if they're only producing so many DVD copies of it anyway, I don't think, it feels like it might be something that could enhance their bottom line. It'd be interesting to see if they start doing something like that, because I think, there was a lot of success with people. There was a lot of buzz around them selling Stranger Things on DVD. I remember they created
exactly.
I think people really liked the casing that they used. They made it look like a VHS, and it looked like a kind of a worn VHS as well. And
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I picked up both season 1 and season 2 of those. They're in different style. One looks like a US big box in the cardboard carton kind of style. The other's in more of a clamshell style. And it comes with all kinds of features in it. But the problem is that they haven't done that for season 3. There's no copy of that, and we've nearly got season 4 coming to streaming, and there's no physical of 3. So I wonder if they've abandoned that approach.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot of things about Netflix and how they're sort of approaching a lot of these kinds of things with the way that they're doing TV, and it does seem like they're constantly evaluating is something cost effective for them. They talk about with TV series where it's like the moment they feel like that TV series isn't cost effective, they cut it immediately. In the United States, the whole process of TV was that you wanted a TV series to go in the past and on standard television. The series needed to make it to like however many seasons, like 6 or 7, so then it could be pushed into rerun syndication on local television stations. For Netflix, they don't care about that because they're not going to ever have a show on syndication. It's always going to just exist on Netflix. So if it's 3 seasons, 4 seasons, it doesn't really matter to them how many seasons it is. And probably it's actually better for them if it's smaller, because once somebody has finished binging it, they'll be hungry to watch something else, and they could just move them on to they can use the algorithm to move them on to the next thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so that might be one of those things too with Stranger Things, where they may have found that people buying the DVDs were not as affected by the algorithm, that they couldn't use the algorithm to move them on to other shows that they wanted them to watch. And so they've either delayed it, or maybe the mindset is that they want people to start watching season 4 before they sell season 3, so that by the time you get season 3, you've already started watching season 4, so that they can still again use the algorithm to move people on to the next thing, as opposed to if they buy season 3 first, then they're going to wait and watch season 4. I don't know if maybe there's some sort of calculus there for them that it makes more financial sense, or it might just be with the pandemic. Maybe they just can't produce it right now.
No, it's true. I didn't think about that. There are delays from a lot of these labels trying to get things pressed. There's issues physically getting people to be able to go in and press the discs. With social distancing restrictions and that kind of thing. So, I mean, I guess that is entirely possible. Or, yeah, maybe, I mean, I haven't lost hope yet. Maybe when season 4 kicks off I don't think it's very long from now, it's a month or two, maybe they'll announce a physical copy for season 3. That'd make me very happy.
Yeah, I think, I mean, one thing I've been hoping is that they release a physical copy of The Irishman, which I haven't seen anything about that yet. And, like Amazon has the search reply already set up that for people looking for it. But I don't know too, like if there's a certain point where it's more economically feasible for them to release it on DVD. I know one of the things I was watching, there's a director, Jay Horton, who has done some DTV stuff that I've reviewed on the site. He has a YouTube channel where he talks about the process of making movies and putting them on places like Amazon Prime. And he was talking about when to pull a movie from sort of the streaming Prime and having it be, rental on demand, that there's a certain shelf life where it's better to just have it be a rental and have people pay $4 or whatever than to have it available on Prime for the streaming because of the compensation you get. And I wonder if there's a similar calculus when it comes to when something should be available on DVD for Netflix versus keeping it only on Netflix and people only being able to watch it there. Like maybe there's a saturation point where people are still watching The Irishman. I don't know. I mean, considering how long that movie is, I don't know if people are still like going for it, but it might be like, okay, we need people, or maybe the same thing with Stranger Things. Like they want people to keep watching it and discovering it on Netflix for a while, and then they decide, okay, now it's time we can put it on DVD.
Well, what I've been finding a lot of the times is the last bastion of physical media is going to be Germany. That's just proving itself to be more true every day. If I can't find a physical copy from Australia or the US or the UK, if I look on Germany, they've got it, and it just seems to be the last place that there's going to be copies of films that are in physical format. And as well as that, what I've been noticing a lot of lately is more and more burn-on-demand discs coming out of the US, which for a collector, it's just, I mean, I don't like the idea of paying premium money for a BDR or a DVD-R that I could have made at home.
Right.
It's just, it feels really lazy to me. I mean, I know that the limitations of a DVD run, they only have to be a few hundred copies to be worthwhile. So I don't understand why anyone does DVD-R print runs. It just seems really quite lazy, and it's just not conducive to collecting.
Yeah, and it. I wonder if with the success of these companies like Arrow and Vinegar Syndrome, if some of these other bigger companies like Netflix, or even like Disney or whoever, maybe catches on to that success. And I feel like Disney already has had that model, because that was what they used to do with their cartoon features, was that they would release them in these sort of limited edition versions every so often. I mean, I think there could be a huge advantage to that for some of the more popular things, to just be like, okay, for 3 months we're going to allow this to be bought on Blu-ray or something. And I think
that would be really, that'd be a compromise.
Yeah, and I think if they, I think part of it too is you again, I mean, when you think about, like, if you're on YouTube and you post an episode of an NBC program, it'll get taken down within 24 hours. Like, somebody will catch it that quickly.
Yep.
So you have to feel like these companies also see that there is a sort of a secondary market, or there's a market out there. If people are selling their DVDs, as DVD-Rs on sites like eBay or something like that. You would think these companies must see that there's a market for it, and they would want to just sort of gobble that up and sort of make the money themselves instead of letting a proprietor, sell DVD-Rs of them. But I don't know if maybe it's just the calculus is there that it's just not worth it for them financially right now.
Yeah, I mean, that could be the case, but I do see some small changes. I know that, and I bought some myself, the horror streaming platform Shudder.
Oh, yes.
They've started releasing physical copies of some of their films. Even that new series of Creepshow, you can buy that on a Blu-ray in the States. Some of their releases, I've found you've got to be careful. They're on burn-on-demand discs, but most of them seem to be actual legit pressed discs for these little Shudder horror films, and I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think these companies are I think like Shudder is one that I think they probably recognize where their market is. That a lot of the traffic that comes to them, it comes via sort of viral grassroots social media.
Yep.
And so they must go and see that the people that are posting on Twitter and places like that about their movies have Instagram accounts where they're showing off their collections of things.
Exactly.
And yeah, and it must be, they must, again, when you think about how quickly a movie can you think about how quickly copyrighted material can get removed from YouTube from some of these companies, they must be paying attention to some of these other trends and seeing a potential, way to make money there.
Yeah, well, I hope they do, and that the future's not as bleak as I'm predicting. Maybe we will see a bit of a turnaround. Maybe the fact people are being at home a lot more now. Definitely, I know that myself and a few of my friends have been quite amazed when we've been selling old DVDs on eBay. They are selling very, very quickly. There are people out there hungry for DVDs, and I'm not just talking, the latest or Arrow movies, just things that I've upgraded 3 times over, 15-year-old DVD. They're selling on eBay. There are people out there that want physical copies now at home. Maybe that's an Australian thing at the moment. I don't know. But I'm definitely seeing the second-hand market online for physical media is increasing. The VHS market has gone completely bonkers.
Yes.
In the last 3 or 6 months, that's gone from crazy to just nuts.
Yeah, I was completely shocked. I went to this sort of secondhand shop here in Philadelphia that sells secondhand books, movies, music, all that kind of stuff. And I was looking through their VHSs, and of course, you get your standards like the 2-tape set of Titanic that you see like 5 or 6 of.
Yeah, it's always Titanic.
Right, exactly. And but then they had a copy of Savage Streets, like an 80s movie with Linda Blair.
Yep.
And I looked on the price tag, and it was $40. They wanted $40 for it. I'm like, this can't be right, But then I noticed underneath it they wrote the word rare. Like I'm supposed to be like, oh, it's a rare video, but people are buying that. They are spending that kind of money for some of those. It is amazing. But to your point about the DVD section, I do think there is a part of people that are, they're kind of tired of what's available in the streaming services like that. There's so many movies that just are not that you have to rent. That's the only way you can watch them. They're not available to. They're not part of any kind of streaming package. And I think like my wife wanted to watch Cocoon the other day because yeah, I think you could only rent it, and you can only rent it for like $10 too. It was like, or you can only buy it or something. It was really weird. Like there was no streaming service that had it, and I think people look at it and they're like, you know what? Why don't I just go on eBay and see if somebody has a copy of it and just have it on my collection? It's like it's a movie I like. I want the movie anyway. I think there is starting to be more of a turn towards that for sure.
I mean, if you go back just a couple of months ago with that mini fiasco about Gone with the Wind, that made its way over here as well. I mean, our streaming services did not stop showing that. It was still fine. It never went away. Like I think it might have gone away in the States for a brief period. But I was seeing DVD copies of that selling for up to $100 on eBay.
Wow, I never even thought of that because I got that on DVD a long time ago. It's probably like the very cheap like cardboard, where
Oh, snapper case. Yep.
yes, exactly. Which I have to assume if that thing's in storage, is probably the cardboard is probably all warped now and it's probably in bad shape. And it was the DVD. It's a two-sided DVD.
Oh, flipper. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I never even thought of that kind of thing because, yeah, you think of a movie like that yes, it had a lot of problematic elements to it that were really bad. And you watch it and you think like, okay, yeah, there's so many things about that are really bad. But from a, cinematic history standpoint, I think we don't know what to do with a lot of these movies. Birth of the Nation's an even bigger example where it's like all of the things that Griffith does in that movie from a technical standpoint are amazing. But at the same time, you've got the Ku Klux Klan as heroes, as, it being depicted in a heroic light, which is horrible. So I think, that's another thing I never considered is that, as we start to kind of figure out the way that we can place these movies, that we can figure out how to figure out what's valuable in them and and parse out the parts that are really bad and understand that those are bad. People are going to probably start coming back to these movies a little bit. But if you're HBO or a company that has the rights to it, it's harder for you to put it on your streaming service and deal with the backlash than it is for somebody on eBay to just sell a copy of it, or for a small scale person to so that I never thought of that, but that makes a lot of sense that there's gonna be a space that's gonna be carved out for these kinds of movies that have that problematic history. I think of another one.
Exactly. I also saw a bit of an uptake in there's the old Disney film that they've since just rejected, Song of the South. And when Disney Plus launched, they made a claim that we're going to have every Disney movie on there except Song of the South. That's not on there. And I started to see the Laserdisc copies of that fetching way more than they ever did on eBay, because that didn't even make it to DVD.
Right.
That ended on VHS and Laserdisc, and now people are wanting to see Song of the South again.
Yeah, I think it's you think of a movie like The Searchers, I think is the John Ford movie that is kind of also it's not so much about it's more about the problematic aspects of it have to do with how they were dealing with First Nation people in the film.
Yep.
And I think it's kind of the same thing where it's like these movies have some sort of cinematic value for people, and there are aspects of the movie that are important to sort of the history or legacy of filmmaking. And then it's just a matter of, we don't know right now with the current language that we have, the current sort of ability to manage these things. We don't know how to deal with the rest of it, I think. And at some point we're going to figure out, at some point we're going to, figure out what to do with movies like those. And at that point, it's going to be a question, I think, for companies that, like the big companies like Disney, is it worth the risk for them to have a movie like that in their catalog? That's when they deal with the backlash. But then for collectors that despite knowing that it has a problematic past to it, that kind of for them, I think there are a lot of people out there that sort of can watch a movie and say, there's a lot of things in here that are really bad, and I'm recognizing the really bad parts. And then there's some parts of this that, I think are important that I want to recognize as well. And I think it's where like kind of a secondary DVD market will come in for those kinds of things, is that, a company doesn't want to deal with the backlash, but a seller on eBay will. And I never even thought of that before, that like, my copy of Gone with the Wind that I have, which, I watch Gone with the Wind and I see all the really bad in it. I see, how many really bad things are in it. But that thing could fetch a lot of money because people are, they're going to want to watch it just to know what the movie is. The movie existed and that people are still going to want to see it.
Exactly. And removing something from existence is not going to help educate people on the problems, of a film that's nearly 100 years old. You need to see what it was to understand, why you don't want to do that kind of thing now. I mean, it's just about having a historical perspective. It's not endorsing the behaviors. It's just, this is where we were then. Look how far we've come.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, I think, one of the things was AFI's 100 films list in the late 90s came out. They had Birth of a Nation on there.
Right.
And then when they re-released the list when they updated the list to include movies that came out in the 90s. They had removed it and they replaced it with another Griffith film, Intolerance. And I think it kind of speaks to that point that a movie like Birth of a Nation, we just don't know what to do with it. We don't right now. We don't have the ability to mitigate the fact that Griffith was doing massive things with cinema at that time that nobody else was doing. At the same time, we can't have the KKK as conquering heroes, right? It's not a message that people want out there. So at some point down the road, maybe we will get to a point where we can, have a good conversation about a movie like that, and that that it can exist in that space where you can sort of understand what it is. But right now, it just seems like there just isn't that capability. And so, what do you do with a movie like that? Because you're right, you don't. Birth of a Nation should exist. Like it existed. It happened. And there, even at the time it was made, Griffith faced a lot of backlash. That's why he made Intolerance, was almost as a reaction to the backlash he got to that movie. And the same with like a lot of John Ford's movies as a director. He's considered one of the most influential directors of all time. But a lot of his westerns have a lot of problematic aspects to them in the way that he dealt with Native Americans in those films. And so it's like, well, are we going to just throw out all of his movies, or can we figure out a way to understand that like there's some really bad stuff in here that and I think eventually we're going to get there. I think it's sort of like a very new thing. I think just think about Birth of a Nation being on the AFI 100 list in the late 90s. Even at that time, movies that had a lot of really bad aspects to them were sort of forgiven for their bad aspects.
Yeah. Maybe the answer is going to be these niche labels, the boutique labels. I mean, they know that there's a market for these movies, and they don't have to have the large risk that the film studios themselves don't want to bear anymore. I mean, if you look at, although it's not particularly about films that might be a bit suspect these days, but companies like Kino Lorber that seem to have massive access to Warner's and MGM's libraries, and they've been just releasing these catalog titles that, if you went back to the start of the DVD age, an MGM title came out on MGM DVD. That's not really the future. I think it's the boutique labels are, like RoboCop. Why is Arrow releasing RoboCop? That's that itself seems strange to me. Why are they releasing Mallrats?
Yeah,
these big big studio films, but that's sort of, I guess, the future, and maybe that's where you will see some of these titles coming out on smaller boutique labels in fancy boxes with a 1,000 limited run and a little card that says, "We don't endorse the message in this movie, but we present it for historical accuracy."
Well, yeah, and also too, maybe one of the advantages to Blu-ray and with these companies like Arrow and Vinegar, especially Arrow, where Arrow, like, you think of their RoboCop, where they just had so many interviews with the cast and crew. Maybe that's what you do is you get some, film historians, and you get some, some professors that can sort of give it the movie a cultural context, and they can really discuss about like the problematic aspects and really deal with them in this sort of a nuanced space that you can't do normally, right? Like, so in a Twitter battle, back and forth Twitter argument, it's just these people just sending off these 140 character barbs, whereas Arrow could put out a movie like something as really bad as Birth of a Nation, it really has but they could really give it a context where you could watch panels discussing the really bad aspects of it, and add that as a piece to it. Or same thing with Gone with the Wind. They could even do it with Gone with the Wind, and that might be the solution. Is, like you said, they'll maybe put a message saying we don't endorse the things, but also having people discuss the problematic aspects and really, calling the film to task for the bad parts of it, or even calling the society at that time, and maybe even talking about the film's legacy. They could say, like, Gone with the Wind was so popular that it perpetuated a lot of these, this more institutionalized racism on a national level because it was so popular. And they could talk about sort of the legacy, the bad legacy, as much as the good legacy. That might be the other thing too, is that a company like Arrow that's so good at that, where they're adding all of these features to the film, they could add things like that could give the film more context. And so then, like you said, we don't lose the movie forever, but by the same token, Arrow's not saying that we think this movie's great and we're endorsing all of the aspects of it.
Exactly. And I mean, if you look at the first example I think of is a UK company that's called 88 Films. They put out mainly horror films and martial arts films, but they've got documentaries on their discs that are sometimes longer than the film.
Yeah.
Like a 90-minute, 87-minute, sweet spot horror film, and then they've got a 110-minute long documentary interviewing everybody that had anything to do with the movie, and then the entire subgenre of that film and its siblings in filmography. Like they go seriously deep with some of their documentaries. So that's definitely something that could happen with some of these films that are otherwise shunned.
Yeah, and what it could do is, like you said, because I think you're right when you make the point that if you just eliminate the movie completely, because you think about, like, in America right now, one of the big issues is, like, there was the Nazi propaganda film Triumph of the Will,
Mm-hmm.
that I think, when I was growing up in the 80s, they would talk about that movie, and they would talk about what how that was used to sway popular sentiment against the Jewish people in Germany at that time. And I think eventually they stopped screening it in schools because it was so, it was considered so vile. But, then you kind of look at what's happening now with the way, with Trumpism and sort of the ways that, immigrants were depicted. They were using some of the same themes as in that movie. And so it's almost like you don't want people to lose a movie like that, because it had an important historical significance in showing people how easily propaganda.
Exactly.
Yeah.
These things exist.
Oh,
You have to acknowledge that a movie like this was made, and just because people want to see it again doesn't mean they are agreeing in the views. It just needs to be not forgotten, so that we can learn from these things.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think maybe that's the space. Maybe that's the thing to think, is that Disney streaming doesn't really have the capability, or HBO streaming or whatever. Streaming services don't have the capability to put a movie in the proper context, because all they can do is show the movie. That's it. Whereas DVD, Blu-ray, with the amount of space that they can put on there, or like especially with companies like Arrow who do multiple disc sets, you've got the ability to give a movie the proper context. And you can also, when you're making the movie, when the company makes it, they've got the ability to think in terms of, like, whoever's watching this has the ability to watch these other parts if they want, or they can leave it. They don't have to see these pieces that give more nuance, but at least we did it. At least we added these pieces in to give the film that. So, I mean, maybe that's what another space where we have to think of physical media as still having a purpose, that it for some of these movies, that there are just too many issues with them by having them in streaming, just having them out there with streaming without being able to give them the proper context, that physical media can add features to something to give it more of a context.
Exactly right. It definitely does. I mean, if you look at the quote unquote solution that they came up with for the Gone with the Wind to get it back on streaming, was to put a 3-second wall of text, "I'm sorry," at the front, and that's it. There's nothing else. That's more of a legal obligation than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, you think about what a company like Arrow could do with a Gone with the Wind. I mean, they could talk about the historical significance. They could talk about the fact that Hattie McDaniel won an Oscar for that, and she couldn't even sit with the rest of the cast because of segregation, even at the Oscars in Los Angeles. In the United States, we think of segregation as only being something that existed in the southern part of the country, but here they were at an Oscar, the award ceremony, and she couldn't even sit with the rest of her cast there.
Right.
There's a whole a lot of things that could be, and even just that, the legacy of, people of color could only be certain roles in movies at that time, and that you couldn't have, Hattie McDaniel be the star of a movie. It just, all of that stuff could be featured more prominently in a DVD set that, could talk about more of that, that background, or more of that, give the film a much better context, I think.
Yeah, I agree, and I mean, and it's possibly that it has been done. I know that there was a few years ago a pretty substantial Blu-ray box set that was put out about the film. But the point is that was a few years ago. When this streaming problem happened, I happened to walk into my JB Hi-Fi, and they actually had signs put up saying "Gone with the Wind" is out of print. They specifically put these signs up because people were asking them because they wanted to buy the copies. but there is no physical copy of that movie in print, at least in Australia at the moment.
Yeah, it probably happened here in the States as well. So and I mean, I can kind of understand taking it out of print and really trying to figure out like how do we manage it. And I think that's probably, you know, the reality is there are a lot more Gone with the Winds out there than we want to admit. I think that there are a lot more movies that were made. Yeah, so it means there's a whole section of movie out there that, you know, I mean, you know, just thinking about, you know, just here in the United States, our history with racism. I mean, there are a lot of TV shows, there are a lot of things that you know you could look at and say, okay, these things, you know, they're very problematic and they need to be handled in the proper context. So, yeah, I think, you know, Gone with the Wind is just the tip of the iceberg, but maybe that's the key, is that physical media is the thing that can kind of give these films the proper context they need, so we don't have to just throw them all out completely. But, you know, we can understand that they have all of these issues with them.
Exactly. I mean, the same thing seems to be with television as well. I mean, I was completely shocked when it was just after the Gone with the Wind problems that I saw. Are you familiar with the British show Fawlty Towers, John Cleese?
Yes, yeah.
There was an episode in that one called The Germans, and the BBC streaming platform removed that episode. It is just such a knee-jerk reaction. I think they had one or two complaints about how it doesn't suit modern, you know, interpretation of British life, and so they pulled the episode. And John Cleese got on the back foot on Facebook, and I think they ended up getting it back on. But I mean, I don't have that problem. I've got the DVD box set.
Right. I think that's the thing, is that like with streaming, it's like you don't have the ability to sort of create context and nuance, because it's just that the episode exists as the episode. So I think, yeah, it's going to be one of those things where people find more and more of those films that they're just not sure what to do with them, or these episodes of TV shows that they just don't know what to do with them. And so it's going to be, they're probably going to get pulled initially, and then, you know, people might react and they might add them back in. I guess that's the other thing with streaming services, right? Is that you can pull things and add them back in as you see fit, which is probably our big issue with Netflix, is that they can do the same thing, whether it's problematic or not.
You never really own something. It's never really yours. You're just renting it, and it's just like, you know, renting in Blockbuster. One day you go in there and you can't rent your favorite film anymore because they've, you know, recycled the stock and put something else in. There's no real difference. Yeah,
exactly. Well, maybe that's a good place to leave this conversation. But that, because I think the film we're about to talk about, Skin Traffik, is one that I've only been watching on streaming. Do you have a copy of Skin Traffik, or is that one that you're watching on streaming?
Yes, I have the DVD right in front of me.
Oh, perfect. All right, excellent. So, yeah, I mean, you know, one of the reasons I thought it would be great to have you on this episode to talk about Gary Daniels is because I think, you know, thinking of like that 90s, early 2000s action period where I know, you know, your site Explosive Action covered a lot. And, you know, Gary Daniels was such a fixture at that time. And then I think when you talk about actors like Van Damme and Seagal, who kind of fall back into the DTV mode where they were originally on the big screen, it felt like Gary Daniels might have been one who got squeezed out a bit there, that he was just starting to get big. And then companies were like, well, why would we have Gary Daniels in this when we can get Jean-Claude Van Damme or something? And
exactly.
It's kind of too bad, because watching Skin Traffik here, I'm reminded of just how good he is, like just how what kind of quality he brought to the action game.
He's definitely the best part of this film. I mean, that's for sure. The film, I'm sure we're going to talk about it. It's got some issues.
Yeah.
But his kickboxing in this one, he's actually really quite good in this. I mean, I don't know, he must be 60 or 50s by now, but I'm not entirely sure. But he's kicking ass in this one. Yeah,
it's an interesting thing, right? When you think about like you know, actors because I think he was born in 63.
Yeah. 63.
So he's definitely in his 50s for this. And it's interesting because, you think of like, you know, like him, Van Damme, I think Dolph Lundgren, they've kind of like really tried to maintain their physical stature. Whereas you think of like a Seagal who, you know, it's sort of, they just kind of add layers of clothing to him because he's sort of becoming less and less in shape. But, you know, Daniels is someone who I think wanted to show, like, I'm still able to do this kind of movie. Please, you know, keep casting me in these lead roles. And I think he was trying to show that I can do every bit that these younger guys can do.
He was very convincing, and I tried looking for obvious stunt doubles. I didn't see any with him.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the things interesting because the last time you were on the podcast, we talked about Avengement with Scott Adkins, and
what a great film!
Yeah, it's amazing, and it feels like, at least in the DTV realm, it feels like England, the UK is really putting out really great action stuff. I mean, this film was set more in the UK, but Adkins stuff with Jesse V. Johnson, Ross Boyask with Stu Bennett. They're putting out a lot of really great stuff right now, and this just seemed to fit in with that. Seeing Gary Daniels running around England, beating people up. There was just the film never seemed to go too far before it ramped up the action again.
Yeah, no, it was pretty much full on action the whole time. I think its main issues are just down to budget. It's pretty obvious that some of it's quite cheaply filmed. There's a lot of CG blood squibs. It's a few extra dollars could have polished it up, but it's still a lot of fun.
Yeah, and the other thing too, I was really shocked at the end. And spoiler for anybody that watching this, but Eric Roberts spends most of the movie just sitting in one location. Yeah. I was shocked that he actually got a second location in the film. I thought maybe he was just going to be only in that one. And he does a scene with Michael Madsen, and neither of them are in the same shot. And you can kind of just tell that this is being, that it's just like, we got them for whatever time we've got them. And so, okay, Michael Madsen will do his scenes this day, and Eric Roberts will do them. And so there are a lot of those kinds of elements to it where you're just like, okay, obviously Michael Madsen and Eric Roberts didn't shoot their scenes together. Or if they did, it doesn't look like they did.
Yeah, that actually reminded me of like watching an old early 80s Godfrey Ho ninja mashup movie when you've got Richard Harrison on one end of the phone talking to a guy in a completely different movie on the other end of the phone.
I think what was the one? I think it was it Ninja Strike Force? There's one where he goes to the door. He actually goes and so it's like he's supposed to be talking to this person in their apartment, and he's just like on the other side of the door. And so it's like the person opens the door and they're talking and he's on the other side. And it's like, there was some element of that in this where Eric Roberts is not talking to any of these people, but it does kind of feel that way.
And it's we've got to talk about the cast. You just reel it off. I mean, obviously Gary Daniels. You've got Mickey Rourke that looks like he'd rather be anywhere else but in this movie.
Right.
He's doing such a good Steven Seagal sitting in a chair impression in this movie. That's what I got from it.
Yes. Yeah, he gets up.
Just needed the donut beard.
Right, exactly. I mean, I think the only time he gets up, right, is to go get this disc out of a safe for Gary Daniels. I was surprised he even did that. I was surprised he didn't just be like, the safe's over there. Here's the code. You're all set. And Michael Madsen and Daryl Hannah, they have scenes together. Yeah. But other than that, I mean, I don't think Michael Madsen has really any scenes with anybody else.
I was really struggling to determine the point of Michael Madsen in the film. I enjoyed seeing him with Daryl Hannah, and again, spoiler alert, how their relationship ended. I fell on the floor laughing so hard. It was just so completely random. But then you've got Eric Roberts, you've got Jeff Fahey. I think Jeff Fahey did a really good performance. He was really good in this, I thought.
Yeah, and the funny thing with Jeff Fahey is that you see his name at the beginning, and the film just keeps working its way through, and it's like, when is Jeff Fahey going to show up? And yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I think we talk about with someone like an Eric Roberts, who he does have a little bit more of a part in this film, even though he's only in 2 locations. They get a lot out of his part, but we always think of someone like an Eric Roberts who makes the most out of a small part. But Fahey really does a really great job with the small role that he's given.
Yeah, he really does. It was very believable. I think he's quite an underrated actor. He's done quite a few 2000s era sort of sci-fi channel action films, and he's always good fun in those.
Yeah. I mean, I love his PM stuff. Was The Underground was one, and then of course The Sweeper, where he plays C. Thomas Howell's dad in that one. It's a really great scene there. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if this is something that he does. I mean, he probably has done more of this, and I just haven't seen it yet. But it feels like a lot of actors are taking the Eric Roberts route. Michael Pare is one I've seen doing that kind of thing.
Oh, he's in everything. Yeah.
It's like they're all kind of trying to stack up as many small roles as they can. I think I think they probably see with Eric Roberts where he makes a good living off of that, where he just is in as many things as he can for a short period of time. I think his wife is his agent, and so she gets him booked on as much as possible.
Oh, that makes sense then. He does appear to be in like every second direct-to-video action film. It'll have and Eric Roberts.
Yeah, his so one of the funny things is there's a show here in the United States called My Cat from Hell. I don't know if they show it in Australia.
I don't know that. Huh?
No, so it's a reality show. This guy Jackson Galaxy, who's kind of a cat whisperer, he goes to people's houses where they have cats that are just they're unable to live in the house. Like they're either like tearing up the place, or they're going to the bathroom everywhere, or they're just scratching people all the time. And so I guess Eric Roberts and his wife, where they live in LA, they have a lot of animals, and they had a cat that was blind, I guess, and she was having trouble dealing with one of the other cats in the house. So that was it. He was on the show, this guy Jackson, but it was Eric Roberts and his wife, and Eric Roberts was only on the show so much because he was off shooting things at certain points. So some of the time it was just the wife, but from what I understand is that the wife tries to get him booked on these reality shows as a way to sort of keep inflating his profile. Like he was on the addiction show here in the United States as well, where he kind of passed off that he was addicted to smoking marijuana, which he really wasn't, but he kind of created that illusion to be on the show. And I guess like he wasn't creating enough drama, and his wife they called his wife and said, listen, he's not creating enough drama. He needs to do stuff or we're going to kick him off. So he was on there's a podcast called Eric Roberts is the Fucking Man. I don't know if you've listened to that podcast
No,
before.
I haven't. I will now.
Yeah, they Doug Tilley, who does No Budget Nightmares, he and his friend Liam, they do the show, and they actually were on a panel where they got to interview Eric Roberts, and he talked about some of these things, which was really fascinating to hear his side of it. But it also gives more context when you see him in something like this, where it's like, who knows if where he was even shooting these scenes, where this was being done.
Yeah, exactly.
But he's in there. He just does his scenes in the office, and then I was completely shocked that he was in the airplane hangar at the end of the film. I didn't think he was going to make it there.
His role really reminded me of the role he had in The Expendables. It was that like slimy bad guy. He's really good at doing that.
Yes, he is. Yeah, I think he really picked that up from what was that Killers video, Mr. Brightside, I think it was called, or I can't remember what that song was called. But it was like kind of early 2000s. He was in that video, or maybe mid to late 2000s.
Oh no, not familiar with that one.
Yeah, and he was kind of playing a similar character, and apparently like that video was really popular. I think people just like saw him in that and just thought, well, let's just keep making him play that character as much as we can, because you're right. I mean, he's really excellent. I mean, it's just like the moment he picks up the phone and starts talking to Gary Daniels, it's just it just kind of enhances the film in a certain way that it wouldn't have if he wasn't the bad guy.
And it helps that he's just got this smile the whole time. He never stops. He's just got this evil smile. They're like, oh, geez, don't do that. He's going to shoot you in the knee. Don't do it.
Right, exactly.
He seems to be enjoying it too. Like his career in doing a lot of these direct-to-video films, be they action or not. But he's not going the Bruce Willis path.
Right. Yeah, which I think is important, right? Is that Bruce Willis? It's like. I think there was a Vice article recently, or some magazine did an article recently about. It wasn't Vice. I was thinking Vice because of the movie Vice he did. But there's an article recently about a film critic did about how he just kind of shows up in these movies and would rather be anywhere else. And
he's terrible.
Yeah, and I think of Eric Roberts, how you don't get that sense from him.
Not at all.
Yeah, I like that. I think that it does enhance the movie. And Michael Madsen almost kind of you feel like you'd get more of that from him too, but it doesn't seem like he has the same mindset either. It seems like he's also like I'm a professional actor and I'm gonna do this scene.
That's it. Yeah, I don't think he gets quite to the extent of Eric Roberts, and maybe that's just sort of his range. I mean, but he's definitely not just there for the paycheck. You can tell he's trying. He's committed to the roles that he's in.
Yeah, I think there's something about that sort of that professional actor. I remember seeing a documentary on Cary Grant where he, I guess like I don't know if it was Sophia Loren he was dating or Diane Cannon, somebody that he was with who was like an actress who was coming up sort of more in the later period where they, it's about getting the right roles and doing the right films, and they couldn't understand why he would just do the movies that he was doing, these like, kind of screwball comedies and whatnot, when he was considered this really great actor as well. But his mindset was he came up through sort of the vaudeville, sort of the English theater system, where it's like you're a professional actor, you act, and that's how you make money. And I think that's how I think that's how like an Eric Roberts or Michael Madsen sees it, where it's not about me getting the right parts. I think Gary Daniels is sort of taking a little bit of that, because I've noticed he's been doing more films, but I think Gary Daniels has a different stake in it, right? Where he can't just show up in a movie for 5 minutes and be Gary Daniels. He's got to show off his action chops and show that he can still be an action lead. He doesn't have the luxury of doing like Eric Roberts or Michael Madsen, where it's like, I'm a professional actor, I'm going to come in and do these scenes, and just having my name on the tin is probably going to be enough to push this film for a little bit further.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when you are known for being an action star, you've got to bring something. Otherwise, people are just going to be disappointed and then not buy your next film.
Right. Yeah, I think Michael Jai White put it best in an interview I saw recently, where he said, once you kick someone in the head, you get known for kicking people in the head. And so that's I think that's, but I think also Gary Daniels takes pride in it. I think Gary Daniels, he wants to show that he's, like for him, I think he does want to be known as an actor as well. I think they all do. I think, I think I saw Scott Adkins in an interview recently where he was talking about, not getting the respect that he deserves as an actor. I think they all want to be known as actors, but by the same token, he was a competitive kickboxer, and I think he also said he trained to fight Muay Thai a little bit later on.
Yep.
And so there is that competitive spirit in there where he wants us to see that he still has it. He can still be an action lead, which I think it enhances a film like this, where you're able to say like, yeah, get after it. I want to see, all of these scenes, and it makes it that much better to have a lead like this who's actually really engaged and wants to pull off a good film.
Exactly. Just because you brought up Scott Adkins, have you happened to have seen the trailer for his new one, Dead Reckoning?
I haven't seen that yet. I keep seeing people are posting it on Instagram and things like that.
Yeah, I think this is an example of Scott saying, trying to do something that's not being the action guy. The trailer doesn't fill me with a great deal of confidence that it's my kind of film. But right. when he shows up, he's putting on the full Boyka Russian accent as being the bad guy of the film. But he doesn't seem to be kicking any tables, so that's a shame.
Right. I think the thing with Adkins that I always appreciate is it felt like Adkins came up in kind of the same tradition as we as action fans came up in, where it's like I'm watching Van Damme, I'm watching Seagal and all of these people, and it's almost like when he. Yeah, it doesn't feel like he wants to put on the same kind of show for us.
Have you been watching his YouTube series, The Art of Action?
Yeah, I'm behind. I'm about halfway through the Dolph one, so I haven't had a chance to watch the Seagal one yet.
The Seagal one is priceless. But I'm still amazed that he managed to make it happen. I mean, knowing how Seagal is, but what I love so much about the start, like the first 10 minutes of every single one of these, he's a gushing fanboy. Yes. Every single time. Like the Cynthia Rothrock one, his jaws open the whole time.
Yeah, and I think it's something I think we lost in action movies for a period, because we only had these older guys who were kind of just going through the motions in a lot of cases. I think Van Damme is one who doesn't necessarily want to go through the motions. It seems like he's trying to put out more mature films, and which doesn't always work in the sense that the movies are more like character studies than they are action films in some cases. But like Gary Daniels, when you watch some of his, he still wants to show off that he can do some of these things still, which I appreciate. But yeah, I think Adkins has really infused a lot of life into the action market, because he's saying like, this is what I wanted out of an action movie when I would watch it, and I'm going to try to deliver that, which I think is always exciting to see.
Oh, it's very exciting. And I mean, not wanting to turn this into yet another Scott Adkins discussion, because I could go on about that for ages. But, the stuff he's got coming out, like he's coming out in, I think, 2 weeks. He's got a new one called Seized, and that's an Isaac Florentine film again, and it's got Mario Van Peebles in it. Like, these things are just epic little B action movies, and I'm so happy that he's doing them.
Yeah, I agree. 'Cause, yeah, I think I cannot remember the name of the one that he did with Isaac Florentine more recently, where it took place in like the American Southwest or kind of near Mexico.
Which one was that? Close Range?
Close Range, that's it. Yeah, and it's like, his stuff with Isaac. It's interesting, like, because he does stuff with Isaac Florentine and Jesse V. Johnson.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's all high octane. It's all just like, let's see how many great scenes we can put in these films. And I think that's one thing about Skin Traffik that I did like, is that I felt like, for the budget it definitely didn't have the budget that those Florentine or Jesse V. Johnson ones were. I don't think those ones always have the highest budgets either. It just seems like they kind of know what they're doing with those budgets. This film, I think, I think this one had more constraints to it, but it did seem like it wanted to maintain a certain action quotient that okay, we've got a certain amount of time, we need to have another fight scene, or we need to have another shootout or something, and I think that was a really good part of it. And then I think what was good is it seemed like it leaned on those stars like Michael Madsen or Eric Roberts to get us through the periods.
It's I think the tone of the film, when I was watching it, particularly the first act, the tone of the film made me think of a mid-2000s era Seagal, like The Foreigner. Yeah. That was where I was thinking that's we're in, it may as well be Bulgaria, because it's always Bulgaria when it's Seagal, and there's the pretty girl with the Russian accent, and it just felt like a mid-2000s Seagal film, but with actual proper martial arts and kickboxing.
Right. And one thing I thought that this movie did well in terms of that aspect of it, sort of like the pretty girl with the Russian accent, was that by having Dominique Swain, who's acted in stuff here in the United States, and I think she was most known for there was a version of Lolita that came out in the late 90s that she did the starring role in for that. But it seemed like they kind of did some work with her where you kind of tell with like the makeup that she was wearing and the outfit and stuff, where it was like they didn't, with the Seagal movies, where they have the sort of the human trafficking aspect of it, they just get like the most beautiful woman and they put her in the hottest outfit, and then she falls in love with Seagal, and it's like he's like saving her from this life, and she's so happy that she wants to be his concubine or wife or whatever. In this film, by having an actress like Dominique Swain, who's an American actress, the Russian accent, of course, there were points where especially me, who works in the field of teaching English as a second language, I think her Russian accent, she used too many articles. I think there was too many there was too many thes in there or something. But I think it added an element to it where this was not just sort of like this beautiful, glamorous woman who just happens to be in this field that she needs rescuing from. There was an edge to it there. There was a grittiness to the way that they had her look, it felt a little bit better. And then, of course, the way that they mitigate it, of course, and I'm spoiler alert, but giving away, it's not just that she and Daniels ride off into the sunset together and live happily ever after, which I thought was a good twist on that, because that trope of the white slavery and the hero comes in and rescues rescues the woman, it's so tired, and we see it a lot in Seagal movies. I think that Seagal seems to be the one where you see it the most, but I thought that this movie dealt with it a little bit better, which I appreciated.
Yeah, I agree. I think their approach to the topic was far more mature than you'd get in some of those mid-era Seagal films.
Yeah, and I always joke that this kind of thing is like what I call baddie in a can, right? Where it's like, there's really no need to develop a baddie who is either working as in white slavery. I always think there's a few different job. Animal poaching is another one. It's like where
Yeah.
you see the trapper, right, with his bear traps, and it's like you just want to see the hero beat the crap out of him. It's just because you don't really need any kind of plot exposition. And here, again, these two Russian guys that are mistreating these women and having them in this gross brothel area. It's like it doesn't really take much work for us to want to see Daniels go in there and clean them all out.
Exactly. I mean, you got the part in the school, and the girls are no more than 13 or 14, and you instantly hate the bad guy. You may not have even seen him yet, but it doesn't matter. It's pre-baked hatred.
Yeah, exactly. I think it works. In a 90. I think this movie was like 96 minutes long. I mean, in a movie that's in that 90-minute range, yes, somebody like an Eric Roberts, you maybe need to develop him a little bit more, but it's nice to not have to worry about developing the baddie. It's just sort of, just go for it, and we're just waiting for Daniels to be unleashed. And I think what was really nice was that he delivers. That these fight scenes that he's in, they deliver what we're hoping for. I think that's one of the things, I think, again, too, with this sort of baddie, and I can, or like you said, they're pre-baked baddies. With a Seagal movie is that it's just sort of like, okay, if he beats these guys up, that's fine. And it's almost like he can kind of get away with not beating them up as, not making it as exciting as we want, because we just want to see this guy get his comeuppance. So if it's just Seagal just grabbing his arm and breaking his arm, that's enough for us. And so I thought the fact that they didn't lean on that with Daniels, like they still made these action scenes and these fight scenes really high quality, I think was really important.
And boy, did Eric Roberts get his comeuppance in this one. That's another scene where I was just howling with laughter because it was unexpected. We were in the warehouse. I figured it'd just be, a quick couple of shots or kick him in the head and he goes unconscious. No, this was up there with the liver eating scene in Savage Dog. Like this was crazy. It's great.
Yeah, that's a good point when you mention that about Savage Dog. I didn't even think of that. That like. Because Savage Dog was an interesting movie in that you had like these fight scenes that sort of like kind of off and on he'd be doing these fight scenes, and then it's like the second half of the movie it's Adkins Unleashed. And, yeah, and this film had a similar quality, right, where he has the initial action scene. The situation goes bad. We don't really know exactly how it goes bad until we're shown after. But then he kind of goes underground, and there are these scenes where like these Russian guys that are dealing with the human trafficking, they're kind of pushing him around, and you're just like wondering when he's going to take care of business. And then it just happens. He just does it, and that's kind of it. And I think it's a little bit longer than Adkins is Unleashed in Savage Dog, but it's still that same idea where it's just like, okay, that's it. We've sort of set Daniels in motion, and he's just going to keep taking care of business.
Yeah, exactly. It sets up the plot devices, then you can just sort of sit back and watch with glee as everyone just gets taken apart.
Now thinking, because I was looking on Daniels' IMDb, and of course I think everybody right now is sort of at a point where they're not doing a lot of stuff, or they're not having a lot of stuff released, except for Scott Adkins, who, for whatever reason, he still pumps out 3 movies a year, despite...
He must have had them ready in the can.
Yeah, I think he was saying, because he had Dolph Lundgren on his show, on his YouTube show.
Oh, yes. They got stuck in post-production. They're almost finished on that one, I think.
Yeah, I think they started shooting and then they had to stop or something, and then they kind of were kind of get back and doing it sort of socially, doing it in a way that's socially distanced. I know I've been seeing productions on like Instagram, places like that, where people are showing behind the scenes things where they are finding ways to do it. Now that I think we have a better sense of how people can catch COVID-19, that they can figure out ways to be safe. But yeah, they talked about that. Like Castle Falls was one that I guess that they were supposed to be shooting this year and they had to stop it. So maybe next year. Maybe everybody else, it seems like they don't have anything coming out in 2020. Maybe for Adkins it'll be next year that we'll have 2021 will be a year where he has trouble getting stuff out.
Well, Gary Daniels has got at least 2 for 2021 at this point. The one that I'm the most excited about, I don't know if you've seen the poster for it. It's called The Gardener.
Yes.
And it's got Robert Bronzy in it, the Charles Bronson clone, with Gary Daniels playing a guy called Volker, and the poster's awesome. And obviously he's going to be playing second fiddle to Bronzy, but that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, and I was it's interesting because he I think the most recent film he's had that actually came out was I Am Vengeance, where he played the bad guy.
Yeah.
And there he had really great scenes, and so I have a sense that in his mind, he wants to kind of keep doing. I mean, he does seem to be trying to branch out and do other stuff. When I look at some of his other, I mean, he did that Wrong Child movie that was
Oh, yeah.
Lifetime TV movie here in the U.S. So he is trying to branch out and do other things. I think maybe he is seeing it as like at some point he's not going to be able to do this kind of action stuff the way he wants to do it, and maybe that's his mindset. It's like if he can't do it at the level he did it in Skin Traffic or I Am Vengeance, where he had those really great scenes as well. I wonder if his mindset is if I can't do it at that level, I don't want to do it at all. I don't want to have a whole bunch of stunt doubles, doing my scenes for me and that kind of thing. So it'll be interesting to see if he pivots out of this or if he just can, or what it looks like down the road. Because he is, I mean, I guess he's what 57 now, I guess. So he's at some point, I guess it has to, the law of diminishing returns comes in, and age kind of takes its toll. But I do wonder what it's going to look like in the future for him, because it seems like in this movie, at least in Skin Traffic, he wanted to show that he still really got it.
Yeah, and he definitely does. I mean, and you're right. I mean, the future for his style of action, I mean, he will probably have to change at some point. I mean, you look at Dolph Lundgren; he does more shooting and punching now. There's less, side kicks and doing the splits or anything like that. Or if you look at Arnold Schwarzenegger, he plays the sheriff.
Right.
But he can still be an action star. He just might have to sort of change his approach. But yeah, like you say, he may not want to do that.
Well, that's the thing too. Like with Dolph was that he got a hip injury or something like that, and just he couldn't recover. Because when you get older, you have trouble recovering. I think too from, and that's the other thing too is that Scott Adkins can just go out there and tear it up, and if he injures something, he just. I mean the same thing happened with Rothrock and Richard Norton. They talked about it for them in the 80s. They would get injured on the sets of like Hong Kong films and just keep going. Now it's like when you get past 50, it's like you get those injuries. They don't heal as quickly as they did at that young age. So that's the other thing too. Is I mean the fight scenes that he did in Skin Traffic, they were ones that definitely, if you make the wrong twist or the wrong turn, or if a stunt guy moves in the wrong direction, you could easily tear a ligament or something like that.
They were definitely very believable. I mean, you could tell he was not faking anything. They were real fights.
Yeah, and I think for Daniels, I think when I think of like his really best stuff, I mean when he came on with PM Entertainment, he was someone that, like, it's interesting when you watch some of the early PM films where he's got these small supporting roles. I think they must have looked at it and said, boy, we've got something here. We've possibly got something. And they started casting him. We think of the 3 R's with him, right? Rage, Recoil, and Riot.
Yep.
And he kind of, PM Entertainment goes under in 2000, and he does kind of founder a bit. He has some roles in the 2000s, but I think he had trouble maybe finding where his place was after PM, because he had only just started to make a name for himself. And I mean, he did some good ones. I mean, he did some, there were some that kind of had bigger names, but so the one I'm thinking of that he did, the I don't know why I can't think of the name of it. I'm going to page through the anime film that the live action anime.
Fist of the North Star.
Fist of the North Star. Yeah, he talked about how that one he expected it to be bigger, and then when he saw what it looked like in post production, that it was more. There are elements that were more unrealistic to it. Like where people getting punched and their faces being moved all over the place, and
yeah.
When he saw what it ended up looking like in post, he realized it wasn't going to be something that audiences would connect with, and I think he was disappointed. But I think he felt like that was going to be his movie, the one that was going to be the thing that kind of cast him into the stratosphere, and he would be on the big screen all the time. And it does seem to work like that with a lot of these DTV stars, that there's that one film that they think there's going to be that one film that gets them there, and it doesn't, and so then they just kind of have to keep languishing in the DTV world.
Yeah, you can see that he was hoping it was his version of The Punisher or something like that, but yeah, it didn't quite get there, and he moved on to Heatseeker and Rage, but that's good for us. We get some good films out of it, but he's didn't really get into the stars like I guess he hoped.
Yeah, and I guess that's another thing that's interesting is that we think that like big screen success makes a career. And I think with someone like Daniels, and I don't want to talk about like the end of his career because he's still got movies to make. He's still, I mean, he's younger. It's funny because we think of him being in his 50s. He's kind of on the younger side compared to the other guys that are in there doing it. Like Seagal, he's like I think he's like 10 years younger than Seagal. So, we don't want to think of it like it's the end, but when we think of the career that he's had, I mean, he's given us a lot of really great films, and so even though he didn't get those big screen roles that we would have, that he would have wanted, I think, his career overall has been a successful one. I think there's been a lot of really great films in there that we can look at.
I agree, and I think he's sort of got like a longer filmography version of someone like Jeff Speakman. Jeff launched into the stratosphere with The Perfect Weapon, and that should have set him up, but a series of things happened, and movies like Street Night and The Expert didn't set the world on fire, and he ended up in sort of direct-to-video for a while. It feels a little bit like that with Gary. Gary's somewhere between sort of Scott Adkins and Speakman in the style of the films. That he sort of reached for the stars. He didn't quite get the big Perfect Weapon style film, but he's then continued anyway with plenty direct-to-video, direct-to-cable action films for 2 more decades from that point.
Yeah, and I think too with Gary Daniels compared to Speakman is that it sounds like from what I've heard about Speakman was that he wanted a lot of input in how movies were made, or he wanted he would demand certain things be in movies, or that script changes were made. And I feel like Gary Daniels never really did that. Like he was, he might have had his input on how and there are a lot of films that he did the fight choreography for and things like that. But it feels like, if he's making a movie for somebody, he's going to make their movie, that he's going to go in there and do professional work. And not that Speakman's not professional, but I think I'd heard that that might have been part of why Speakman got kind of frozen out a bit towards the end. There's that people didn't always want to work with him because he always wanted to say how the film was going to go.
Yeah, he kept trying to, insist on his approach of martial arts, almost as a teaching mechanism in his films. And the producers weren't really on board with that. But yeah, I think you're right. That Gary Daniels is a professional actor, and he's there to make a film and get paid. So you do what you're asked of.
Yeah, and I think the story surrounding him is that the story that he told was that he went to the Philippines and pretended to be a movie star, and that's how he got cast in like The Secret of King Mahi's Island and Final Reprisal. Was that
what great films?
Yeah, they're fantastic. I mean that again, I have to go back to that you're finding King of Mahi's Island. It's like that was like always like kind of like a holy grail movie, right? That when we were all doing this in the mid to late 2000s, it was like, when is somebody going to find Secret of King Mahi's Island? And so when you finally found it, it was like this amazing thing that like this holy grail had finally surfaced for us.
I was thrilled to find that it was definitely one I was looking for ages. And then I got to say I had to take one for the team in terms of how much I paid for this tape, but I approached it from almost a film archiving point of view. It simply wasn't out there. You couldn't see it. And now, my copy, I've seen it sort of floating around the internet a bit because I did share it out there. I'm sure Gary doesn't care at this point. I'm just happy that people will be able to see the movie.
Yeah, because I think the copy that I watched on YouTube was somebody that had pulled it from your copy.
Yeah, that's it. It's got all the telltale signs of being my Japanese tape, and that's fine. It's out there, and it's not a cheap $2 film. It's actually got a bit of budget in it. It's a Jim Gaines directed film. I mean, he took over from Leonard Hayes that I think sort of saw what was happening on the production and went, I'm not having a bar of this, and so big Jim Gaines took over. But they were trying to do a Indiana Jones style film, and I think they really succeeded.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Jim Gaines because in that sense, it's like the film has this one element as being like kind of the first Gary. I think it's the first Gary Daniels film. I think. I mean, it's either that one or Final Reprisal, but I think he did that one first.
Yeah, IMDb says Final Reprisals first, but I mean,
Oh, okay.
IMDb is not always right.
Right. So, yeah. I mean, so it has that. I guess it has that aspect of it that it's one of those first, but also for Philippine action film fans, there's that other aspect of it that Jim Gaines directed it, who is Jim Gaines is such a mainstay in all of those Philippine action movies. So it has more than just the fact that it's a Gary Daniels, a rare Gary Daniels piece. But I don't know how many films Jim Gaines directed, but. So I can't imagine he did that many. So that's another cool aspect of that film.
Yeah, and the whole thing just simply looks like those shot in the Philippines films. Like it's got, from memory, it's got the same, waterfall that was in every Bruno Mattei film. Like it's just right at the right time.
Yeah, it's kind of it's an amazing thing. Those Philippine action films, especially like I think Jim Gaines, he kind of takes a little bit more from the Italian tradition with how those were directed. When you watch that one, it has that feel to it of like those Italian, like, I don't want to say rip off, but kind of like those, like they're biting on an established property and doing it in a certain way. He definitely gains. You can tell because I know he's worked with Bruno Mattei. I think he worked with Margheriti as well. Like he's he kind of is taking that style from them.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think if you look at Final Reprisal, which was also one of the shot in Philippines ones, that for me is a double-barreled shotgun of awesome, because one, it's Gary Daniels in the Philippines, but two, it's directed by Teddy Page. And Teddy Page did pretty much all my favorite shot in the Philippines films, like Phantom Soldiers and Blazing Guns and Black Fire, Blood Debts, Double Edge, all of these great films, and he did one with Gary Daniels.
Yeah, it's a really cool aspect of Daniel's career when you look at it. Kind of, he starts in the Philippines and does those movies, which, like you said, he does the one that has the sort of the added aspect of being a Jim Gaines director. But like you said, Teddy Page, someone who did some really great ones there. He worked with him as well. Then he moves on to Hong Kong. And he does movies with it's a film with Jackie Chan. City Hunter.
Yeah.
So he really kind of gets all of the pieces. And of course, he works with PM Entertainment, which we talked about. And so, I mean, he did one of the Blood Fist movies with Don the Dragon Wilson.
Yeah, number 4.
Yeah, and I mean, they had a really great fight scene. So it's like his career has really spanned a lot of the different aspects that we think of. For us that like this action, this niche of action films, the direct-to-video films. It's almost like he ticks off all the boxes for us.
And one of the biggest surprises I had was when I was buying a film, one of the Hong Kong films I got on VCD. It's called Mission of Justice. And I got that because it's a Moon Lee film and a Yukari Oshima film. And imagine my surprise when in the pre-credit sequence, I see this long blonde-haired guy get his ass handed to him. Before the titles of the film, and if you look at it on IMDb, he's credited as martial artist in prologue. Right. It's just amazing, and I didn't have a clue he was coming.
Yeah, and for people who haven't seen that, it is on YouTube, so you can look that up on YouTube. And obviously, like you said, he's just martial artist in the prologue. But it is amazing to see that it's just like there he is, and it's a great scene too. And I think it kind of speaks to where he was at that time. I mean, he was not quite 30. I guess he would have been like maybe 29, something like that.
It was 1992, so probably just, it's 29, yeah.
And so it feels like he was just kind of like, I'll take anything. I mean, I forgot too. He did 2 films with Albert Pyun as well. So it's like he's kind of worked with everybody, or he's kind of just done everything. And of course, he was in the Expendables. He was in the first Expendables film. Yep. I think we would have liked to have seen him get a bigger part maybe in that, but he was at least in it. So it's been quite a career for him. Like, I think for us as DTV fans, again, people are surprised to find out that he's going to now be the second person with 50 films, that he's only second to Dolph. But he, after Dolph, he has the most films on the site. But when you look at his IMDb bio and you look at that career that he's had with all of his films, it actually makes sense that like he's done so many different types of movies with so many different directors and studios that it actually makes sense that he has that many.
Yeah, and when you look at the people he's worked with as well, like he's worked with all of the other action stars that we talk about. Like he was in Submerged with Seagal, and I guess one he'd probably want to forget, and I guess Dolph wants to forget it as well. Retrograde, which is just shocker, but he's worked with everybody.
Yeah, I think the only person he hasn't worked with is Van Damme. I think
that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's done everybody. I mean, I guess he didn't technically work with Scott Adkins in Zero Tolerance. I think.
Oh yeah, just stuck in like cut and paste job, I think.
Right. I think Adkins scenes were added after, so maybe that's the next one we need to see. Is we need to see him and Adkins do a film together. But you're right. I mean, I think pretty much everybody else. I guess his work with Cynthia Rothrock was only in that film Santa's Summer House, which I haven't seen yet. But
no, I haven't seen that. No. It kind of puts me off by its name.
Right, exactly. I feel like I might have to do it like a holiday theme, at some point, because it's got him, it's got Rothrock, I think it's got Daniel Bernhardt in it. Yeah. It's sometimes with those names, it's like I don't have any choice. I just have to do those movies. But yeah, I think you're right. He's worked with everybody. He's kind of worked everywhere as well. I mean, he's done films in Eastern Europe. He's done them in Thailand, Philippines, obviously in Hollywood when he was working with PM Entertainment. One thing that I thought was really cool about this movie and I Am Vengeance is we actually get to see him in England. I think I Am Vengeance does more to actually place him in England. I think that movie is more of an English film, whereas I guess the only scene that he really has in this that makes me really feel like England is when he's talking to that guy who's posing as a modeling agent, played by Alan Ford.
Oh God, we haven't even talked about Alan Ford yet.
Yes, Alan Ford has one scene in the film, and it is fantastic. And like the way he's like kind of berating Gary Daniels because he thinks Gary Daniels is some kind of like 2-bit punk that's in there to harass him about stuff. Like all of the lines that he says to him are just. I mean, I think it's probably the most UK scene in the film for a film that's shot and takes place in the UK.
I mean, half of Alan Ford's dialogue from this scene was, it was basically Bricktop from Snatch. It was. I think Alan Ford can only play one role. Right.
It was almost like he's sitting behind this him and Daniels are sitting across from each other on this desk, and he's almost like gritting his teeth when he's talking to him, like he's just waiting to be Bricktop, right? He's just waiting to be that character. It's like once Daniels says the wrong thing, that's it. He just becomes that, and it's
exactly.
I wonder if he even wrote his own dialogue. If he just wanted to, just tell him all. It was like almost like if he maybe improvised it or something like that. But I think it was for Gary Daniels. It's almost like he's English, but he's never really in anything that I don't know. There's never any a sign that he's in anything that either takes advantage. I guess the only thing I can think of is Queen's Messenger, right, where he's English Secret Service, but for the most part, to the fact that he's English isn't really a part of the film.
That's a good point, actually. I hadn't really thought about that. He doesn't focus on it, whereas half of Scott's films, they're in England, or he just keeps the accent.
Yeah, well, yes, I think that's one thing I'd heard some people complain that like Avengement, they had trouble understanding what was being said in Avengement, but I think I prefer it that way. I think there was this fear for such a long time that if you make a UK movie and you make it too UK, that it won't sell in American audiences. And I think Avengement maybe showed that no, you just make the movie and Americans will deal with it. And I wonder if maybe that was the kind of thing with Gary Daniels was like that the movies that he was making, there was a fear of making them too UK for American audiences. That I think there's still a sense that Americans can't handle things, and so they have to tone down whatever, for us as Americans. We can't, we can't handle it if it's not American enough for us, I guess. And I hopefully Scott Adkins, the films he's doing with Jesse V. Johnson, and of course the I Am Vengeance movies as well, like they're showing audiences that no, we can handle it if it's set in the UK and if they're using slang terms that aren't popular here in the US.
Yeah, I mean, and Scott's generally good for that, but then he's done that sci-fi film Incoming. I think it was Incoming, where he pops on the American accent, and I was just thrown like, oh, this isn't right. And it was all downhill from there anyway.
Yeah, and I one of the things I liked about the Debt Collector movies was that there was no real explanation for why he's in the United States with his English accent, and I'd rather that. I'd rather there be, so if he's got his natural English accent in Incoming, but he's still working for the U.S. government, I'd rather that than him having to affect an American accent. Because I think, it's the same complaint that I have with Luke Goss is that if you give them an American accent, Luke Goss I think is worse than Atkins, because Atkins still has the fighting ability, but with Luke Goss, when he has an American accent, he might as well just be any other American character actor doing direct-to-video movies here in the United States.
Yeah.
And so it's like what you think of like The Hard Way is a good example. Like he didn't really need to be American in that movie, and you could just replace him with any number of actors when he's American. But if he's using his actual English accent, it adds something to the film. It makes the film a little bit better in that sense. And yeah, one thing I guess we could talk about with Gary Daniels, he's never affected an American accent as far as I can tell.
No, nothing I can think of.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if maybe he tried to once and it didn't sound good. I don't know if he wasn't able to.
Maybe he'll do it in that Santa movie.
Right. Yes. Maybe that's the one. I mean, he was in that Wrong Child movie, where he's he's married to Vivica A. Fox, and they don't even talk about the fact that he's from England and that, and he just he has his accent and that's it, and everybody's fine with it. And I think that's maybe the thing people need to understand is that we're okay with, we don't need to understand why some. Remember with all the Van Damme movies, they'd have to come up with like reasons why he was speaking French.
Right,
like he was
French.
Yeah, exactly. He's from Quebec. Oh, it's he's Creole in Louisiana, which they don't speak French like that down there. And it's they always had to come up with a reason why he had an accent. And I think finally they just gave it up and just said, okay, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
No.
Have you seen the Gary Daniels film Forced to Fight?
Yes. That's the one with Peter Weller?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's one that I was thinking as well when I was watching Skin Traffik, that Forced to Fight's another when he is really putting in he's really putting in his all for the role. I got that from Forced to Fight.
Yeah, and one thing, if you look at his IMDb bio at that time, that's where you start to see like the Santa Summer House. He was doing Christian films which Eric Roberts does as well.
Mm.
And I couldn't find anywhere online that said anything about Gary Daniels' faith or him being specifically Christian, or at least like sort of being at that level that he'd be doing Christian movies. So I think it was more of him taking the work. That he was that was the work that he was given. Exactly. And so I wonder if Forced to Fight, right, when I look at that one, it kind of in that mix of films where it was like, okay, I'm actually being given an action role here. I'm being given a film where I get to be the lead. I want to take advantage of this. I want to do the best that I can with this. And I think you're right about that, because it does show in the action. Like we get something that is really high quality, and maybe that's part of it too. Is that if you're fighting for your paycheck, you're gonna really bring it. If he's looking at his the calls he's getting from his agent, and they're like going to Thailand to shoot 3 Christian films. I get this film where I get to actually still be an action star at that level. I'm gonna really bring it.
Yeah, and he does. I think it's quite an underrated film, and sure, it's even called Forced to Fight. Right. It's like it's action movie plot number 3.
Yes.
But it's got Peter Weller as a bad guy, and what else do you want? It's a good fun film. It's maybe 10 minutes too long, but Forced to Fight. That's a good one.
Yeah, and I think for me, I gave that one a bit of a hard time, because I think the way the plot played out, I didn't like aspects of it, I think. But then I think I kind of, as the 2010s went on, and we didn't get a lot of really great movies in the 2010s for direct-to-video action. I realized there were a lot of movies like that I probably was harder on in 2011 that that period that I go back and look at and say, you know what, no, those, I was lucky to have Forced to Fight with what we ended up getting throughout that decade.
Yeah, I mean, and another one I think we're lucky to have is actually really good is Hunt to Kill with Steve Austin. And that's got Eric Roberts as well, and obviously Gary Daniels. And that was 2010, I think. I want to see more of films like that.
Yeah, and that's a movie where I think Daniels and Austin met on the set of The Expendables, and then I think Daniels was shooting Game of Death at that time.
With Snipes.
Yes, I think they're around the same time, and I think he was shooting Game of Death, and I think that was like kind of in Michigan, kind of sort of again, north central United States. But I think Austin called him to see if he wanted to be on Hunt to Kill, if he would be interested in doing that one. And so he came on. I think he actually he had the scenes he had, but I think he was also fight choreographer on that one.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of I think that's another thing with Daniels is that when you see some of the interviews or the things that he talks about is that like I think he builds up these friendships with actors that he works with in these films, and it when they ask for favors or they ask about working with him again, I think he's excited to kind of jump at that opportunity, which I think is a really cool thing. That like, okay, Stone Cold Steve Austin calls me to do his film, I'm going to go over there and do that. And I think he was the fight choreographer for it, which I think enhanced that film a little bit as well.
Yeah, and it's another Keone Waxman film as well, so it's pretty hard hitting action, and it's just a solid film that came out in 2010 when we were not really getting that many good quality DTV action films.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's the other thing too for me is that it was one of those things where I, again at 2010, I thought that one had issues or there were problems with it, but then I've come back to it and said, okay, yeah, because the 2010s as a decade overall for DTV action was not great. It seems like it's gotten better now. It seems like the end of the decade and kind of now we're getting more really good quality stuff. But I think I appreciate those movies a little bit more now than I did, in 2011 when I was watching them and I was still kind of, we had some really good stuff at the beginning, it's sort of the end of the 2000s. But I think, with what we're getting now, where we're getting a lot of films that are heavily edited, I think, Keone Waxman's a really great example. He works with Seagal a lot, and I think he has to make a movie the way Seagal wants him to make a movie. I always joke that he's the Seagal whisperer, right? Because he gets the most out of Seagal. But it feels like a movie like Hunt to Kill, or we were talking about The Hard Way, which was directed by Keone Waxman.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like when he gets a cast and crew that's invested like that, he really gets something extra out of that movie. That it's when he's not having to deal with the constraints of working with Seagal. You get something really inspired from him. And I think we don't think of Keone Waxman maybe the way we would think of like a Jesse V. Johnson or Isaac Florentine. But maybe part of that is because a lot of the movies that he's doing, he's working with Seagal and he's got certain constraints that he has to work under to make a movie the way Seagal wants it made.
Yeah, well, he wants them made, so he's sitting down the whole time.
Right, exactly. And I mean, there's certain rules, right? He can't lose. There's always somebody who's like sort of carrying the film, right? Like I think Absolution had Byron Mann carrying the movie, or Brendan Foster carries them a lot when and so there's that aspect as well. So it's almost like Keone Waxman has to like kind of get as much as he can at Seagal, and then use this other actor, this actual action star that's like going to do all the heavy lifting for him.
Yeah, exactly. I think as well when we're thinking about the period. When Hunt to Kill was out, that was, as you said, it's off the back of The Expendables, and then things started to move a bit more. I think The Expendables might have helped push some more action films to come out. But if you think about the few years before that, 2007, 8, 9, the real star that was still kicking through it was Dolph Lundgren.
Yeah,
I mean, we got Direct Contact, Command Performance, we got a new Universal Soldier movie, like, and this was all just before 2010.
Yeah, and one thing that's interesting, I had talked with Sean Malloy, who does a podcast all about Dolph Lundgren films. I Must Break This Podcast, and he was talking about how it's really great. And actually, if you haven't checked that podcast out, it's really great because he talks to a lot of people that work in the industry around Dolph movies. And one of the people he talks to is this producer Benjamin Sachs, who not only has done some Dolph movies, but he's actually produced a lot of those Keone Waxman Seagal films as well. Right. So. He has some really great stories behind the scenes about working with Seagal. So yeah, if I Must Break This Podcast on iTunes. If you haven't checked it out, it's really good.
Oh, definitely check that one out. Sounds great.
Yeah, and he talked about in that period when Seagal, Van Damme, Wesley Snipes, actors like that start kind of moving into the DTV realm from the big screen. How Dolph was doing a lot of really bad films in that kind of early 2000s period. And he almost takes more of an active role in the way his films were being made, where he was directing more of them, or he was acting as executive producer. And it felt like maybe he was as we get into that period in the late 2000s, with Command Performance and those kinds of movies, he was sort of having more of a hand in how those were made. I think.
Yeah, that's really true. Like once we get past Retrograde, right? We had The Mechanic.
Yes.
And that thing's awesome. Missionary Man's pretty good. I wouldn't say Diamond Dogs is that good, but you can't win them all.
Right. Yeah, that one was a bit of a rough one, but it seems like he has more hits than misses at that period. And at the same time, I think that's when Gary Daniels also is starting to get squeezed out. And I think maybe he didn't have the reputation in Hollywood the way Dolph did, where he still had that he was in Rocky IV. He still had that he was in Masters of the Universe.
Yeah.
He even still Punisher film because even in the early in the late 2000s, we still hadn't gotten to like the Marvel Cinematic Universe yet, where it was like these where Iron Man had become successful. We were kind of just starting to get there, so I think there was still a sense that like Dolph's Punisher was the Punisher. I think we still have that sense.
Still is.
Yeah, we still feel like he's the Punisher, but I think there's been this whole slew of Marvel movies since where there's this idea of what Marvel movies could be. And I think at that time, we didn't really know what Marvel could be. And so I think he still had that Punisher thing that he could kind of lean on. I think now, we still think of the Punisher so great, but I think there's a sense in Hollywood that these Marvel Cinematic Universe movies are like a step above those 90s Marvel iterations that we enjoy. But I think, just on that point, like Dolph had more pull to be able to have more of an active role in how he wanted his films to be made. Whereas I think Daniels, when we get into that period, where PM is collapsing in the early 2000s and he's trying to, get roles, I don't think he had the ability to say, oh, I want to direct this, or I want to say how this is going. I think, now he does a little bit more. I think he does more fight choreography and he does more of that. But I think the way that Dolph was able to sort of salvage things and put out really good things while everybody was getting squeezed out, Daniels didn't have that to lean on. And so he got squeezed out in a way that he ended up having to go to Thailand and shoot films that I don't think he wanted to shoot. And you get some of those duds in his career that I don't know if we would have had if he had been able to maybe had more say in how he wanted things to go.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Now I guess at this point we're closing in. I can't believe we're already closing in on almost 2 hours here. So maybe it's a good time to wrap this up. But before we do wrap it up, Simon, any final thoughts on Daniels or his career, or even on the film we were talking about?
Well, I mean, on Skin Traffik, I mean, I think we sort of covered it all. It's a solid film. It suffers from budget. Some of its effects are not great, but there's a lot of heart in the performance from Gary, and that's what really holds the thing together. I mean, a lot of the the secondary actors, like the scenes with Daryl Hannah and Michael Madsen, I just sort of laugh through. And obviously, we laugh our way through Bricktop as well, but Gary's really giving his all in the film, and I think it just shows in the final product that the first 10-15 minutes I was watching it, it was overly bright, and it was just, oh, this is feeling really cheap, but you quickly get past that because his performance is so strong.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think it's the movie, like you said, that it has budgetary issues. The plot kind of gets a little bit away from it, with sort of conspiracy theories and things like that, and
Mm.
all that. But it's like you've got Daniels, who's really wants to show that he really has it, that he's still a viable action lead, and he more than produces. And then, like you said, you get these scenes with people like Madsen and Daryl Hannah, or Bricktop, or Eric Roberts, that sort of fill out the movie, right? When because I think you can't just have fight scenes every I mean, it'd be nice to have a whole movie of just fight scenes, but they have to sort of have the ebb and flow. And it was nice to have those actors filling in the low points.
I agree, and if you hadn't read the list, the cast, and it's just sort of like a surprise each time you watch it. You go, oh, hello, Mickey Rourke's just shown up.
Right, right, and it's like, yeah, I mean, it's like the scene where Daniel sort of liberates the brothel, sort of goes in there, cleans out all the baddies that are in there, and then he gets on the phone, and the first person he calls is Eric Roberts, and it's just
it just keeps on, it's like peeling away a banana. It's just
right. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a kind of movie that we used to we talked about how much we enjoyed in the 90s, where you'd see all like you watch a PM film that had like 5 people in it, that you recognize, and how much fun that was. This movie does it the right way. I think we think of so many movies where it's just like, here's Bruce Willis mailing it in for a scene or something like that. This movie does it in a way that's really fun. So these people are not just sort of cheap filler, just put their name on the tin and they're only in it for a second. The movie does a good job of sort of spreading out their parts. So even though Eric Roberts is only in one or two locations, he's in the film enough that you get enjoyment out of it when he's there. And then again, Daniels' fighting just underpins the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree, and I think as well, what I really enjoy about it is, and I don't know if you got to see this when you're watching it on streaming, the DVD cover of this film is spectacular. It's got 8 heads inside an exploding mushroom cloud, and there's a giant fireball, and there's a helicopter. I don't remember there being a helicopter in the film, but there's a helicopter in the fireball. It's just a giant gun, things on fire. It's everything you want.
Yeah. So there's 2 different covers. So I think the streaming service has the cover you're talking about. There's another cover that's just like Daniel's kind of in a black suit. With the sunglasses on.
Yeah, the IMDb cover. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that one, and then I think you're right. I think the streaming service actually does have that version. The one that you're talking about, where it's like all the heads are there, and it's interesting because I think from a film standpoint, I think from the streaming service, that's the version that they want, because they want you to see all of the heads. They want you to see all because that's the thing that's going to get you to stream it. Whereas I guess maybe from the DVD version, you've got time to read the cover, I guess, and read all the names.
Yeah, I mean, at least with the DVD that we got, the Australian DVD, we have that the fireball cover, and the names they're so small at the top, they're not even getting you to look at that, but they're hoping you're going to look at it and go, I know that guy, he was in Kill Bill. I know that guy, he was in Snatch, and you buy the film.
Yeah, actually, it's the Letterboxd entry for it has that.
Right.
Yeah, the Letterboxd one has the one you're talking about with sort of all the heads, and yeah, you could. I mean, Mickey Rourke's head is probably disproportionately large for the what he had, his role in the film. But
he was the Seagal. He was the Seagal in this film. He just sat there, and at the end, he had the final line.
Right, because I think they're sort of teasing a potential sequel to this, I think, is what it is. But I don't see that happening. It's been 5 years since this film, or 4 or 5 years since this came out, and we haven't heard anything about a sequel. So I think it's one of those things where the budget, the studio is okay with one movie, but try to get 2 out of us, it's not going to work.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think we're going to get a Skin Traffik 2, but the one thing I am looking forward to checking out, I've got it on my way, is, and maybe you've seen it, hopefully it's good. The director did Instant Death with Lou Ferrigno.
Oh, I haven't seen that. No, that would be. Is it a more recent movie?
He did that just after Skin Traffik. It's 2017.
Wow.
And it's got Lou on the cover in a black coat holding a pistol. I'm hoping for a good time.
That sounds pretty fantastic. I haven't not been really watching Lou Ferrigno's stuff. I know he's been doing more stuff recently, and I haven't really been catching up with it as much. I see the cover; that looks fantastic.
It does, doesn't it? It looks amazing.
Yeah,
No, I've not really been following his recent films either, but when I saw that cover, it sold me, so it's on its way.
I'll be curious to hear how that one goes, and maybe I'll try to catch it as well. Maybe it's streaming here in the U.S. on something. But yeah, we'll have to check that one out. I guess at this point, Simon, where can people find you online in terms of social media and whatnot?
Sure. Well, the blog's still there. I do, unfortunately, not update it too much, but that's explosiveaction.com. I've still got, a decade of reviews there, and hopefully I'll get some more in there as well. But if you just put Explosive Action into anything, Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, and you'll find me there.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I love your YouTube page is fantastic because it's just like the different hall. I mean, your Instagram page is great too because it kind of shows the different hauls that you've made and the stuff that you've picked up. It's always really cool. But I think the YouTube channel is great just because it. Like with Secret of King Mahi's Island, you're able to kind of show the box art and some clips from the film. And if people are not, they should definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow you on Instagram and social and all that as well. And I think I've got the link to your site on my page, so at least that is there.
Yeah, that's good because I have a link to yours on mine as well.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you again for coming on, Simon. Actually, just quickly plug for me. As you know, everybody. DTVconnoisseur.blogspot.com. That's where everything is, so you can find everything there. But thank you again, Simon, for coming on. This was a really fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'll come back again.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Wendy's new French toast sticks are so delicious, some are saying that they're better than their mom's breakfast.
Excuse me. Did you just say Wendy's new French toast sticks are better than my breakfast?
Mom, is that you?
Answer the question.
I said some people are saying that because they're so crispy on the outside and fluffy on the inside and perfect in every way.
Uh-huh. And what do you think?
I think it's time to tell people to choose wisely. Choose Wendy's new sweet and crispy home-style French toast sticks.
That's still not an answer.
At participating U.S. Wendy's during breakfast hours.